Batman Forever? It sure felt that way. Hello and welcome to another episode of Not So Super Movie Reviews. Today we're going to be tackling a little movie called Batman Forever. And this one has been on the front of my mind since I started this channel. There's several movies that I feel like I've kind of been saving up to do. Batman and Robin, Green Lantern, or a few others that come to mind, Spider-Man 3. I decided to finally tackle this one, and really had a lot of fun coming back and rewatching it. It had a critic score of 38% and a user score of 32%. So pretty much both the critics and the users think, well, there's something missing from this movie. Let's get into why that might be. You know, the first thing that works about this movie is just the overall design, the art of all of the costumes, and the overall aesthetic of the set designs. It's all over the top and colorful, but yet dark and sharp and gothic. It's really extremely unique and extremely fun to look at. I mean, every scene with especially the villains is just a spectacle. And we'll get into this with some of my other points, but this movie just goes over the top in a lot of ways. It sort of leans into its own absurdity, and the style is one of the ways that it does that to just great effect. I mean, that's something that I feel is missing from a lot of today's blockbusters, is just a unique style. We don't get a lot, especially even the superhero community, we don't really get a lot of very unique styles. We're getting more of that nowadays, more recently. But it was something that for a while your usual superhero movie was sort of painted with this coating of overly CGI'd sci-fi random stuff. And so coming back and watching these older movies, that's one thing that I have to take away. It's just the aesthetic and the heart that it has. You know, the second thing that works about this movie is the casting. Well, some of the casting, specifically the villains, Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey, both extremely iconic Batman villains, Batman movie villains. And again, like I just said, it plays into this extremely over the top. I mean, Two-Face has got this crazy outfit where, one side is like a dragon scale and the other side is like leopard print. And, he's got a girlfriend who's like the angel and a girlfriend who's like the devil. And his whole layer is piece by piece. Honestly, like, it's so much fun. It is extremely campy, and all of their lines are over the top and overplayed, but again, it works to great effect. You like seeing these characters. Jim Carrey basically is just playing Jim Carrey, but that's always a great thing. And especially as the Riddler, like, he really just, a lot of kids my age, or, most people that saw this movie, probably when they think of Riddler, they think of Jim Carrey. And all of his costumes and all of his lair and his devices are all very campy but very over the top and a lot of fun, and their performances are electrifying compared to some of the other performances in this movie. And the third thing I want to say, and the final thing about what worked about this movie, and this is definitely something subjective, I know all of my opinions are subjective, even though I do have a professional YouTube channel that you're watching right now. 50% of most opinions are subjective. Some of the things that we talk about is kind of hard to deny, like Spawn having bad graphics or Catwoman having a terrible story. There's plenty of things that are not subjective, but this third thing is definitely 100% subjective, and that's nostalgia. This was the first Batman movie that I saw in theaters at the age of 7. And it was, all being marketed through Happy Meal toys and those glass cups, which I've actually ordered a couple for my backdrop here, with the Riddler and the Two-Face on them. But this is the first movie that really sparked my interest in superheroes and in Batman, which, I just rewatching it, I feel like I'm back there again. And really, if I don't want to give you this review without you knowing that bias is with me, and that bias is just that this movie was really a part of my childhood. This is really the Batman that, besides the animated series Batman, this is the Batman that I got to know the most, probably. Alright, so let's talk about what doesn't work with this movie. And number one on the list is kind of a combination, which is terrible lines slash poorly delivered lines in the way of bad acting. This movie is riddled with bad lines.
Why? Oh, why?
Sorry. And it's amazing how many bad lines are in this movie.
You're trying to get under my cape, Doctor?
Caffeine will kill ya!
It's the car, right? Chicks love the car.
Surf's up, big kahuna! Holy rusted metal, Batman! Huh? You're grown, it's all metal, it's full of holes, you know? Holy!
Oh.
This is more than likely obvious. Well, a lot of this has to do with bad writing. This movie is over the top in every category, and cheesy lines are no exception to that rule. But I just don't think that over the top philosophy that was going on with this movie works in every facet. Over the top story, over the top lines. Really didn't translate well. And when you have such powerhouses like Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey producing these crazy energetic performances, your Robin and Val Kilmer, they sort of just seem, I don't even remember Robin's name right now. They just are very dry, very stiff. Now I know that's kind of like he is doing one of these. That makes it pretty tough to act in. Even Nicole Kidman character, just very straightforward writing and really stiff deliveries from pretty much everyone else in this movie besides the villains. The second thing, which thinking back on this movie, you might not remember this, but I promise if you go and do a rewatch that you'll feel what I felt, and that is just that it's so slow. It is just unbearably slow. The reason that it's slow is, I think, due to really a couple of factors here. There's an overuse of transitional shots, just that are panning over the city or going down a hallway. Like, almost in between every single scene, there's some kind of expositional transition shot that's showing you Gotham, which is great to look at. But it takes up a lot of time. Those 1 minute transitional shots really add up. You find a lot of this movie you're spending watching those transitional scenes. They try to tackle too many little subplots in this movie. You've got two villains, each with their own origin stories. Two-Face less so, but still there to some degree. You've got Robin and his backstory, his family dying, him getting adopted by a rich man for some reason, even though he looks like he's 25. Him finding the Batcave and deciding to become Robin. You've got Batman's origin story in this one. They show the iconic scene of his parents getting shot, and they deal with his origin a lot. You've got the love interest who's, for some reason, is interacting with Bruce and Batman. And you have the classic, overdone, I think even for the day's standard, overdone storyline of, does she love me or does she love Batman?
Now I have you, and I'm wishing you were somebody else.
And really none of these little storylines that they try to tackle get enough time to be complex enough to be interesting. And so this 2 hours is just filled with surface level stories. The final thing that doesn't work about this movie, and this is really something that a lot of older bad superhero movies suffer from, is just lazy writing. I think as your common fanboy is coming of age in the 90s and the early 2000s, we started to get to a point where all these fanboys grew up with all these movies, and now we're older and you just can't get away with things anymore. Your Infinity War and your Endgame that has to try to tie everything up perfectly, or some, fat nerds on the internet are going to be like, hey, you never did anything with that, or that's not how time travel works. But a lot of these movies that we grew up with, they are just really prime offenders of just leaving things hanging out or not spending enough time, fleshing out certain things. The motivations for our villain in this movie are just, they're crazy. And I talk a lot about this on my channel, but fleshing out the motivations of the villain is really, I think, a key to a lot of the best superhero movies because, as much as you're interested in knowing the origin story and the motivations behind your hero, it makes it that much more interesting to know the motivations behind your villain, which is the principle they went with Infinity War. It was said that it was really a movie about Thanos' origin story, and I thought that was great. It was a better movie for it, and this movie just says, here's two crazy dudes, look at them go. There's the Riddler's backstory, his rise into becoming the Riddler happens like so fast. It's like he pushes a guy out of a window, and then a week later, he's like the Steve Jobs of mind control. There's tons of points in this movie. There's more than one point in this movie where you could have just killed Batman.
No! Don't
Kill him.
If you kill him, you won't learn nothing.
Just shoot him. He's right there. That age-old trope of like, oh, no, I want the sharks with the laser beams on their heads to kill him, you just I'm going to leave this door unguarded, but you just leave him to die in some kind of crazy way that we're not even going to supervise. In the very beginning of the movie, Two-Face is running from Batman in a helicopter. Batman gets to him. He takes the helicopter down. Two-Face jumps out of the helicopter into the water in the middle of the city, or outside the city, and you can't find a guy in a suit swimming right outside of Gotham City police. You don't have boats and other helicopters. It's just, there's so many moments like that where it doesn't connect to anything logical. I think the fact that this movie went with such an over-the-top story and tone and style, they tried to kind of use that as a pass to let certain things by, but when you're watching it, it's just it bothers you, especially now that I'm grown up and I've seen so many good superhero movies. You're watching this one and you're like, just kill him, just shoot him in the head. I don't want Batman to die, but it doesn't make sense that you're leaving him here, to fall or something. It's just, it sticks out like a sore thumb, and when it comes down to it, it's just lazy. If you would have just picked one villain and spent your time giving them a backstory and motivations, you could have done so much better, and future movies have done so much better. Alright, so who was right about this movie? Was it the critics, the users, or does it deserve a better score? As much as I kind of tore this movie apart, some of the good things I mentioned were very good things. Besides the nostalgia, the style of the movie and the iconic villains are just fun to watch. And to me, even though this movie does drag on a little bit when you rewatch it, it's still rewatchable. We talk a lot about how some bad superhero movies are so bad that you want to watch them again. And Batman Forever is one of those movies. It's one that you can still come back to and you can still appreciate something about. And it knows what it is. It leans into its own campiness in a way that, it doesn't bother me as much to watch this movie and see some of these over-the-top elements because the movie knows that it's being over the top. So you can just sort of sit back and just enjoy it and say, well, they did this on purpose, and it is enjoyable. So really, I have to give it my own score because I do feel like, maybe it's a little harsh to put it in the 30s. So it's not much more, but I'm going to give it my own score of a 45%. I had a lot of fun rewatching it, and I think you should too. Alright, that wraps it up for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked it, go ahead and click the like button and subscribe to my channel for more of this exact same content, going through these bad superhero movies and just giving them a second look. If you disagreed with any of my points or you have anything else you want to add to this movie, the discussion about this movie, just let me know in the comments. I'd love to have a discussion about it. That's obviously one of the things I like, which is why I'm even here doing this channel. So once again, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.